Hello and welcome to the American Patriots channel. This channel is dedicated to addressing and resolving some of America's most significant challenges. Folks, I have really been looking forward to this episode because it's about a wonderful gift that we can give to our children. I have a riddle for you. What is it that's worth $1 million or more, and yet, if you have it, no one can take it away from you? Well, the answer is an education. Imagine an America where everyone reaches their highest potential level of education. So, for example, someone who would have dropped out of high school stays in high school and receives their diploma. Or someone who decided to quit after high school instead goes on to college. Or a third person who, after 4 long years of college, goes on to graduate school and receives a master's degree. If you close your eyes for a moment, can you see it? Can you see an America where everyone stays in school as far as possible? Well, let me show you what it looks like. Wow! What if we could make that a reality? Well, come, follow along with me today, and I'll show you how. To start with, I wanted to describe my experience in and with education. I have a master's degree in chemistry, and I spent about 30 years working as a nuclear power plant chemist. For several of those years, I was an instructor, and I taught supervisors, chemists, plant operators, and technicians a variety of subjects, such as nuclear chemistry, analytical chemistry, plant systems, radiochemistry, quality control, and statistics, among others. I also was a training coordinator for several years for the chemistry department there at the nuclear plant, and I traveled from site to site around the country assisting other nuclear utilities with their training programs. I consider an education to be a national treasure. It's not just valuable for the person that has it, but it helps others as well. Think, for example, about medical doctors, how much their education helps all of us. But then today, there are so many that are lacking in education. They could have gone further, but they fell short for some reason. And this ended up handicapping them all their life. Why is this? Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "We are going to make a country where no one is left out." And I believe that he meant that partly applied to education. We don't want to leave anyone out of a full education. And what I say is, we will leave no one behind. We will encourage all to reach their highest potential. Let's take a look at the value of education. Taking a look at these two sets of bar graphs, the blue bars on the left are showing us unemployment rate in percent as compared to level of education. At the bottom, the level of education is less than high school diploma, and at the top, a doctoral degree. You can clearly see a relationship between level of education and unemployment rate, with, for example, the less than high school diploma rate being almost 5 times as much as the doctoral degree. So clearly, more education is an advantage here, showing us that the unemployment rate is lower for those with the higher education. Moving on to the right side, the green bars are showing us the median usual weekly earnings in dollars for, again, those same levels of education. And again, there's a clear relationship between the two, where the higher the education, the more a person is paid. So we want our children to not be at the bottom of this graph. Instead, we want them to be at least in the middle somewhere. So that's not to say that we should have all our children run out there right now and try to get a doctorate degree. For example, even at the nuclear plant, we needed a lot of different skill sets, many of which did not require anything close to a doctorate's degree. So let's look at what kind of wages could be had for those who finish high school and go just a little further, and see what the value of that education is. Here's a list showing the average annual wages for those who have graduated from trade school. And we'll define trade school as someone who has finished high school and gone on to receive more training, but not so far as getting a 4-year college degree. So looking at it in terms of a baseline on the upper left, the person with just a high school graduation would receive on average $34,900 per year. Looking at all the rest, and there's a lot of them there, so I won't go through all of them, you can clearly see that people with additional training and education make a lot more than a person with just a high school diploma. In fact, many make more than twice as much. Just to name a few, a dental hygienist, $78,000, plumber, $60,000, air traffic controller, $84,000, crane operator, $50,000, and so on. Okay, with that information in hand, we need to establish a goal. Our goal should be to help our children reach the highest level of education based on their ability. In order to do that, we're going to need to establish some actions. And these actions will have to deal with setting high standards and also raising the quality of education. The first action should be to establish measures for our schools. And here are the measures that we need. First of all, speaking about our educators, we need to ensure that our educators are of the highest qualification. So we need to set some high standards for them. That way we're sure that they are able to do an excellent job in teaching our children. But in doing so, we need to address their income as well. Currently, educators are well underpaid. We need to significantly increase the income of our educators, and just to spill it out, to pay them what they're worth. Number two, we need to limit class size to set a standard there of student to teacher ratio to ensure that our educators are not overwhelmed and each of our students can get an adequate amount of attention. Number three, we need to establish adequate resources for them, including tutoring. A lot of learning occurs in the classroom, sure, but sometimes students need some help, let's say with their homework, Or maybe they have questions that they didn't get answered while in class. Well, we need to make tutors available for them for those issues. Number 4, we need to ensure that we have a high quality curricula and also top-notch textbooks for them. Number 5, we need to establish standardized testing. Sure, we use tests to measure the competency of each student, but we need to use standardized tests to measure the performance of the school. That way we know whether it's actually working or not. And then finally, for those high school students that are looking to go on to further their education, they're going to be applying to colleges and technical schools. If they're turned down for some reason, then we want to know about that, because the high school is supposed to prepare them such that they can be accepted more often than not at whatever college or technical school that they apply to. So we need to track acceptance ratios. One thing that I learned right away when I started teaching was that a one-size-fits-all doesn't work very well. I had students that were gifted, that could learn at a fast pace. I had students that could learn at an average pace, and then I had some that learned at a lower than average pace. So if I decided to set the pace at average, well, the slow learners right away would be left behind. The average learners would do fine, but then we wouldn't be taking advantage of the aptitude of the gifted learners because we would be holding them back. So what we need then is a 3-tiered approach to education. We can have accelerated classes that keeps the pace up for the gifted students so they could actually graduate from high school before the normal age. Then we have the regular classes for most students, and then finally have the special classes for the slower than average learners. Now there, our aim is very simple. It's really the same for all students, and that is no one is left behind. So for the slower learners, we would need to establish mentors to work directly with them and help them along, kind of a one-on-one approach to give them extra assistance. And if needed, we would expand the classroom time too, possibly to include summer school, because we want them to graduate on time as well. All right, in addition, it is so sad to see a student drop out of high school, but legally they can do so. This is it's a tragedy in my opinion. We need to change the rules to make it such that students are required to graduate from high school or at least receive a high school equivalent diploma, such as a GED. That way, at least they have that, what I consider a minimum level of education. Also, you're going to like this one. We need to establish school of choice so that when you look at the schools around you, you get to pick the one that's the very best performing school for your child. Why not do that? It makes perfect sense. You don't want to put your child in a poor performing school. That's going to set them up for failure. We need to establish school of choice. You get to choose where your student gets to go. And you're going to know where the good schools are because we're going to have those metrics, remember those standardized tests, so that you can see which schools are performing well. Now wait a minute though, there again, some of the schools around you might be private schools. So how about those? You should have the opportunity to send your child to those too. So there we need, vouchers. It makes perfect sense too. We take the money that the state would have paid to educate your child and we give it to you to use to help to pay for the tuition of the private school. Now what this will do, and this is really important to remember, this means that the schools will have to compete head to head. And schools that don't perform well, they may actually disappear. If no one wants to send their child to school A will go away. Well, that's necessary. You might think, well, that's a bad thing. Well, it's necessary because the poor performing schools, we don't need those. This is open competition between schools, and guess who wins? Our children win. Oh, yeah, that's what we want. So that's necessary. Even though it's going to look a little rough out there, the schools are going to have to really fight it out and do as good as they can, and some of them will fail, but our children will win. That's what counts. All right, and then finally, you might say, well, what about these student loans that are going on now? What's the story with that? Well, when our children graduate from high school, do they have a lot of money in their pocket to pay for college tuition or trade school tuition? No, of course they don't. They end up having to take out a student loan in most cases in order to do that. And then that saddles them with debt. Here's something I want to point out. Our politicians thought that the student loan idea was really great. It could allow everyone to have enough money to go to college. Well, this is where it has shown that our politicians are incompetent. They are not bright enough to realize that that doesn't work, but now that they've done it, we can see that that's the case. So what should have they done instead of setting up the student loan program? Obviously, there again, these children who are now graduates of high school, they don't have the ability to pay these big college tuitions or trade school tuitions. So what do? The answer is very simple. And here it is. Who pays for grade school? The government. How about high school? The government. How about college? Let's make it the government. Why not? Why shouldn't the government pay for the tuition, fees, and books for a 4-year degree in college, or 2-year, or trade school? How about it? That's the answer. That's what they need to do. Now, look at how well that benefits the student. The student has this wonderful opportunity after high school, has a free ride to trade school or college of their choice to study whatever they want to study. Oh man, that's good stuff there. And that's what our politicians should have done anyway. So we need a little smarter politicians in office. So next time you vote, keep that in mind. But there again, you might say, oh, wait a minute, hold on just a minute here. Who's going to pay for this? Well, if the government is, oh man, that's got to be a lot of money. You're talking about tutors and summer school, and now you're paying for college and for trade schools. And there again, too, vouchers count for the college and a trade school. If you want to send your student to a private college or private trade school, vouchers apply there too. Oh yeah, they do. So how is the government going to pay for this? That's the question. And I have an answer. Do we have a choice? Isn't it worth it for the government to pay for these things? It's worth it. In fact, here's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said. He said, "The school is the last expenditure in which America should be willing to economize." Amen to that. We need to not economize, not hold back one penny from the good education of our children. And by the way, just keep this in mind too. If our children get a higher level of education, we already saw something. That means they get more money. They can make a higher wage. And what happens when a person makes more money? They pay more taxes too, so there is somewhat of a payback to the government by helping our children to get a higher level of education. And I'm not going to say that it's going to be a dollar for dollar payback. No, I'm not going there at all. That would be dishonest to say that. But there is a payback, a partial payback for that. So it's not a total loss there. But there again, it's the only choice for us. Our children's future is at stake, and we want them to be able to go beyond high school, get that great education, and make good money so that they can be financially stable and secure for their whole lives. Imagine that. Now, one other thing I need to mention, because we've been talking about what the government's supposed to do and what the schools are supposed to do. Well, and that's great because they have a role. That's their part. But we as parents and students have a part too. We have a role, and no matter how great a school is, if a student doesn't work hard and study hard, then that school and that student will fail. So parents, students, I'm talking to you now, and I'm saying that you have a responsibility to do your best. Parents, you need to support your children, monitor their education, and ensure that they're learning their lessons, doing their homework. And students, do your best. Try hard in school, and you saw, if you've watched this video, you saw how much that's worth to you. It's worth $1 million or more if you get that better education versus if you get a lower level of education. So personal responsibility, that means you take responsibility yourself for your own outcomes by doing your best. All right, well, that's all I have for today. Next time, we're going to talk about employment. Well, if we're going to work this hard and spend this much money, time, effort, and resources to get our children educated, we want them to have a job available for them. We don't want them to graduate only to find out they can't find employment. So we're going to talk about that next time, how we can improve the employment picture in our country to reduce the unemployment level so that every person who wants a job can have a job. That job is waiting for them out there. All right, so there again, that's all I have for today. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. There again, I've been really excited about this topic. It's a wonderful topic because I can't think of a better gift to give the children of our nation than a good education. God bless America, and God bless all. See you next time.